Yes.
Yay, excellent. Sorry about that hiccup, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm Danielle Morrill. I'm the GM of Meltano. We're streaming live, so hello to everybody on the internet, on YouTube who may be checking us out. I see there aren't a ton of questions in the Google Doc, which is totally fine. I'm going to post the link in the chat in case you want to add a few things. And while you're coming up with ideas for that, I'll just give you a tiny bit of context on what Meltano is and our team. I know some of you have heard of us before. We're a very small team, 5 people. So myself and 4 software engineers are building Meltano. We got a little bit of attention the last few days because there's been some big acquisitions of other companies in our space. We build business and data analytics tools. So I'm the GM. GM can mean a lot of things. General manager is a pretty funny title, very general. In my case, I'm doing everything from product management to engineering management, checking in a little bit of front-end code here and there, although it may not be the best quality, really whatever it takes to make it so the software engineers can be productive. We have a lot of community that we're trying to build around Meltano, so we have a Slack channel, Twitter, trying out other channels to see where we can reach people, and of course our YouTube channel. So I'm going to jump into the 2 questions here, and then as we go, if you think of other things, feel free to add them. Not sure who this question came from here, but totally happy to answer. When will Meltano be available for demo to clients? And when do you want to have customer beta testers? So we are super early stage. We are like, when I talked to Paul, our CFO, about kind of how to think about Meltano as an investment, it's really like a very early seed stage startup. So right now the struggle, and so the answer is probably not until the end of the year, not until we hit V1. And why that is right now, Meltano might not make us look good to some of our bigger GitLab customers. So we're trying to find our own customers organically in terms of people who are experts in our space and are really great at using tools like Meltano. But if we were to show someone, some big Fortune 500 company what we've built so far, it's probably not ready for them. So we really want to be thoughtful about those relationships because we may not get a lot of opportunities to impress them with a BI solution. So we want to do that when it's the right time. Right now, Meltano is better for startups, for people who are really comfortable with things that have bugs, the open source community, people who are technical enough to work through issues that might come up. So obviously the BI end user is sometimes a data analyst or someone who can't write code. And so for them, it could just be really frustrating. And we don't want to leave them with that frustration as their first impression of working with us. So customer beta testers, we already do have some beta testers, but really we're trying to get those users from our organic community rather than from kind of sales generated relationships. So when I hear customer, I think GitLab customer. If you do get interest in Meltano, you're certainly welcome to introduce them to us. Send them to our Slacks and introductions to me, but I'm going to tell them the same thing that I'm telling you, that we're just very early stage. And so there's a limit to how much value we're going to be bringing to the table at this point. And that's okay. That's just where we're at.
I want to add to that. There's no pricing for Meltano, so we shouldn't be doing any selling. There's nothing to sell. Please let Meltano do its thing. It's fine to join things like this, but it's not expected of you to introduce Meltano to customers, to talk about Meltano to customers. It's not ready for that, and it won't be ready for a long time. We'll tell you when it has a pricing list and we expect significant revenue from it. That's not going to be the case for a long time.
Absolutely. Well said. I guess I'll just move on here. Emily, I read your blog post about all the recent M&A. Are there any concerns about how behind Meltano may be compared to players already in the market? This is great. I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that my internal, personal desire is to, go and deliver a ton of value. It would feel really good. But the reality is we're probably just at the beginning of the game. One thing I've been kind of rolling all this around, so I don't have a super tight answer for you, but I looked at Tableau yesterday, just kind of from a meta perspective, like what is the story with this company, how to get started? And, they were started in 2003. And that really made me think, well, if they're getting acquired right now, they've already gone public. If they're getting acquired right now, we may just be at the end of the first major market iteration on the BI and analytics space. If you think about how different the internet is now from in 2003, how much easier it is to get data, the fact that REST APIs are just prolific, the fact that people can build things like Meltano, I think the market is actually going to be even bigger than we can imagine. I mean, the Tableau deal was $15.7 billion. And a lot of people are saying that's a rich price, and it may be. But if you think about all the data out there that is still not in dashboards, where this problem is still not solved, where the bottom of the market can't possibly pay $100,000, there's just so much more opportunity. So I think the focus for me is more, Sid has suggested right when I joined that our team read Innovator's Dilemma. And it was a good refresher because, I had thought about it more from the context of already having a product. I didn't think about it from the context of starting at the very beginning. In the very beginning, you have this opportunity to serve the bottom of the market. Sid mentioned we don't have a price. And in a way, that's a huge, powerful stick that we wield, because our competitors, the big ones that have already got all these features, they can't go back to a world with no price. They can't go back to the bottom of the market and say, here's something free. I mean, they can offer something free, but that's never going to be the heart of their business. Today, we can make our entire mission to make the bottom of the market extremely happy, and then we can bring all those people with us. And I think another big thing happening is there are more data analysts than ever, and they're more technical than ever. So those people all are going to be transitioning to using whatever tools are on the market right now. If we can get the next 10 million people who consider themselves data analysts to see Meltano as their first choice, that's really powerful. So those are some big dreams, but that's what I focus on. The reality is, to build the features of many of these products is just the R&D in terms of humans X years. It's just a ton of effort. And so we need to be really smart. That's why we're integrating together best in class open source. We can't rebuild everything ourselves. We've got to be picky. Emily, I don't know if you're here, if you want to add anything else, or if you have any follow-up questions.
Thanks, Danielle. No, that was great. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Awesome, you guys are adding questions. I really appreciate it. John, what recent win/result are you most excited about? There's a few. I guess I'll just talk about the newsjacking that we did. So it was kind of funny. On Thursday morning last week, the news broke that Looker had been acquired. And I got a call from Sid on Slack, and I was like, oh God, what did I do? Because I actually hadn't seen the news yet. I was like, I probably did something on Twitter last night before I fell asleep. No. And I hadn't really engaged in the news cycle in a while, just because I've just been out of that for a couple of years. So it's fun to re-engage with the Hacker News kind of rush of trying to get attention for something tiny that no one's ever heard of before. And we thought that went really well. I mean, we got a lot of engagement. We actually kicked off a new open source spec project around defining a LookML alternative. So defining a kind of business query language that's open source. And so we were like, yeah, Thursday, that's awesome, going into the weekend feeling really good. And then, of course, this news broke yesterday about Tableau. So it was kind of fun to go through the learning curve of remembering how to do that whole process, and then to actually get to use it again a second time and iterate. I think the stories we wrote yesterday were even more interesting and just more thought-provoking. We put out a list of the analytics companies we thought might be potential acquisition targets, and I think we just leveled up really quickly there. So talking to the team this morning was talking about, we had an all-time high of traffic to the website yesterday. And traffic's not that important, but it's a good leading indicator. And it took about 90 days from our last all-time high to today. And so the goal is, in like growth marketing at a super high level, is just like, how do you make those intervals shorter? So I think we've got some DNA now built in our team around how to take advantage of these opportunities. So we'll be looking for those opportunities. Hopefully before 90 more days go by, we can find another way that we can get a bunch of attention. So I think that sets the stage for more good things to come. And it was fun to see the whole team jump on it together, kick off a Zoom war room. We had a lot of contributions from the Hacker News community, posted up the link to those folks, and lots of people jumped in. So that was really fun. Walmir, and I apologize if I said your name incorrectly. Who are our main competitors? Well, this is a fun question. So there's sort of competitors at every step of our process, but it's not super clear to me that we have a main competitor for the overall end-to-end solution. My opinion is that the companies that are the most compelling are companies like Periscope and Mode and Looker, and companies that are building modern solutions. And the reason that matters is a lot of these analytics companies that you see, like Tableau, primarily focus on visualization. So they don't really think about, how do I get the data into this? They often leave that problem to somebody else. So the ELT, or the extract, load, and transform step, where you're pulling data out of your different systems and you're loading it up and you're making it so that it can make sense to the tools you're using, a lot of tools out there today just say, look, you do all that somewhere else with something else. And then once you put it into our tool, we'll make it beautiful and you can make dashboards. But that's a huge time consuming and annoying part of being a data analyst. It's kind of like if you're a software engineer and you spend a ton of time on configuration and you're like, I haven't even gotten to write any code yet. I've just been like, updating packages and libraries and stuff. So those tools are amazing because those companies are built by modern web developers who can appreciate that problem and understand how to use APIs. Kind of on the other end of the spectrum, they're not really competitors today, but they could be, or some of the things that we're using, if they're not open source, or if they are, but they need to figure out a sustainable business model, they may want to build into the space that we're in. And so that's one reason for us to start thinking about how to create a business model where they can benefit from being part of our stack. So because we're stitching together different steps in the process, we have competitors at each stage. Actually, there's a great little table on the front page of our website. If you go to meltano.com, I'm just going to go there and screen share with you really quickly. I'm really happy this table is getting used to explaining something. So we've got this little table here, and you can see what we're using in terms of the open source solution or our own solution. And then you can also see how Meltano is an alternative. And the ones we've picked here are arguably all of our quote unquote competitors. It's a complicated thing because in some places we're competing, and some places we're collaborating. But that's sort of the nature of open source, and also the nature of trying to build kind of an integrated end-to-end workflow. So that's kind of, apologies, that's a longer answer than I want to give, but there's a lot. Our blog also, I'll just put a link here, has an interesting post yesterday around which companies could be acquired next. I'll put the link in the chat for you. And that's not even all of them. That's just the big gun. I pulled the big ones with lots of funding. Pulled the big guys with lots of funding, but there are many other interesting, upstarts in the space that, we can partner with or we can compete against, and it's not clear yet. All right, Gabriel, when the right time arrives, what do you see as possible features to generate revenue? What could Meltano Enterprise Edition look like? Oh, Sid, you've got some thoughts here. Do you want to speak up?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to talk for you, but things I think about are around compliance and governance. Things like data lineage, like how did we come to this conclusion? Can we repeat it? Machine learning bias prevention, like prevent discrimination by accident. Separation of duties enforcement, things like audit logs, digital loss prevention, preventing people from walking out the door with stuff. Pseudonymization, mispronouncing it, but making sure you anonymize data so that it's less sensitive, and data/personal identifiable information classification.
That's great. Mikhail, do you want to chime in here? You've got some thoughts too.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to put some things. So reproducible experiments, when you're doing data science, experiments are like a big source of storage needs, actually. So making sure that you make that everybody in the data science team can like reproduce the same experiments, and like you remove the need of having like shared storage, and Meltano can manage that for you. Marketplace for model dashboard would, I think, be a thing that would foster the data analytics like community to like create models and dashboards and data sources that they know of, and then even maybe like make some money when people like use them in their own Meltano projects. So you have like a win-win situation there. Us being only like the marketplace that connect like dashboards to people. And then data sampling, like getting like good samples out of a big data set to run some kind of testing or analysis on could be something that Meltano provides. Better exploration tools to make sure that you can, figure out what kind of transform you need to clean up your data or do some deduplications, these kind of things. So yeah, I think all these things, like there's a lot of things that Meltano could do. It's all about adding them iteratively.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a ton to add here. I mean, I will say I think we probably have value we can add at every step of the process. So some of the things here deal with more, I guess I would say, the outputs of the analytics process. And I think that is probably where we can make the most money. I think there are a lot of pain points in the earlier stages too. We may not make them part of our, paid offering. I'm not really sure, but I think, like I said before, the ELT process is still pretty painful, and there's a lot of configuration. So there may be also kind of managed experience, or like a managed configuration or packaged experience, if you will, so that you don't have to have a software engineer on your team to use Meltano. You could totally imagine a services component, although the margins on services aren't great. They might let us learn things that we won't learn otherwise. Or you could imagine a community run services marketplace where there's, let's say there's going to be 1 million more data analysts in the next 5 years. A lot of these people are really experts in certain areas. They can bring specialization that we can't necessarily have in-house. So there's opportunity potentially for a marketplace, although that's a very slow to grow type of thing. I think there's also quite a lot of interest around orchestration and automation. So at the end of your entire process, you have an insight or you have an output of some kind, and that kicks off some kind of business process. There's a whole field of business process automation that we could touch and connect to. And that field is also modernizing. And it's even, maybe behind the data analyst world in terms of its sophistication. So as it begins to become more sophisticated, we could hook into tools in that space that are specialized or maybe vertically focused. So really, because we're building something platformy, our biggest challenge is we're going to have a lot of opportunities and we're going to have to stack rank them. We won't be able to do all these things at once. We'll need the open source community to join us. Otherwise, it just take 100 years to do all the things that we could possibly go do. All right, just scrolling here. All right, number 6, Walmir again. How different is Meltano compared to tools like Amplitude? Emily, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Amplitude is like a tool that basically you can track what people are doing in a product, a software product, and then visualize it. So it's really great in this one specific vertical around product analytics. I think the great thing about Meltano, to step back, the great thing about data teams is when you can use data from multiple sources. So you're not just looking at product analytics, you're also putting product analytics next to your sales data and letting that shape your sales conversations. And what Meltano does is make it really easy for you to get all those different data sources and work with them in one place. So that was my 2 cents, but please feel free to add on, Danielle.
That's great. I think the only thing I'll add is Amplitude might be a good customer for us. There's things we do that they don't do right now. We could go to them and say, you want to build orchestration, or you want to pull in other data or other things, maybe those things are hard for them. We really don't know how their product is built under the hood, but you could build an Amplitude on top of Meltano's foundation if you wanted to, or they could integrate parts of Meltano into their product. So I would think of them like a point solution. They're trying to solve this one specific use case, which you could set up and try to solve in Meltano. You could, with Google Analytics, for example, you could pull in a lot of the same data. But obviously, we're not trying to sell each of these point solutions. We're trying to sell an overarching platform. So we could have lots of companies in our space be built on top of us in the future, which would be super cool. All right, William, what does the Meltano contributor community outside of employees and team look like today? What's your plan and strategy to grow that community? So our community is super small. I would say we have 2 or 3 people that I've engaged with who have made actual MRs. And then maybe a dozen more who have asked questions and been engaging with us in Slack and in issues. So super small community. Obviously, our team is 5. So that gives us a total team of like maybe 10 to 20, scaling up and down depending on interest level. Until recently, we didn't have a lot to offer them in terms of places where they could contribute. So we're trying to flag a lot more issues where they can actually come in and help us out with our roadmap. And we're building the community pretty organically. I think the really important thing in the very early days is to have the first 100 people actually really care about what you're doing. And there's things we could do, unnatural things we could do to drive community. But right now it's like talking to people on Hacker News, finding their username, emailing them, saying, hey, what you're doing is cool. Let's collaborate. So it's very one-to-one. And that'll probably continue for a while, probably for the foreseeable rest of 2019. It's just like very personal relationships. That first 100 then goes out and they get the next 100. And then we can kind of begin to build a community flywheel. But if you don't build from a really strong foundation, from my experience, you have a really hard time keeping the community together as it grows because people just don't feel like they matter. So that's how we're starting, very grassroots. Just looking in here. Oh yeah, Ben, why don't you chime in on that? I think that's really great for you to talk for a moment about our documentation.
Yeah, so like any good tool, one of the key things you want to enable your users to be able to do is to solve their own problems. It's great that they can talk to us on Slack, but so putting documentation as a first-class citizen is a big priority for us at Meltano, and we'll continue to do so. So I think that's another way we plan to keep in touch with the community and grow it.
Oh,
Are you-
you muted, Daniel.
Yeah, Danielle, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. All right, so there's a question here or maybe a comment, but I'll at least share it, which is there are a number of people on the sales team that have sold BI and analytics solutions. Whenever we get to that point, we're happy to help with anything, reach out anytime. Just say thank you. And we're probably gonna be taking you up on that next year. And if you're curious to follow along with the market at all, there is a Slack channel called Meltano-Comp, which is just a great way to stay educated about the different participants in our space. But really appreciate that. Mike LeBeau, do you feel that growing field of telematics and the surge of IoT connected devices and technology would be an area we could focus on serving our data analytics to, or is there a specific industry / market that you see that has significant potential for our solution? So just for everyone's context, with telematics, this is like data coming out of cars or sensors put in crops or any kind of long distance transfer of data. And it's fascinating, actually. We have a customer reference that we've been talking to in the energy industry, and they have incredible data. I mean, the thing that's happening in that field is people are just collecting everything because they're not really sure what's going to be valuable yet. And it's so cheap to store it, and they have such interesting sensors. So certainly, I mean, that's a data set that would be really cool to load into Meltano at some point. I don't think we have database connectors, but we don't necessarily have all the right ELT tools for that. But yes, I think that's a fascinating use case. As far as specific industries and markets, we're not really there yet. I think as we start to get towards pricing and go-to-market strategy, we would likely pick some verticals to tell stories in and tell customer stories that can focus us in those efforts. But right now, I think we're more in exploration stage. We just want to see what comes to us. I hadn't really thought about telematics before we talked to some of these companies. So pretty much every business you can imagine gives off an incredible amount of data exhaust. Even when they don't mean to, just even being mentioned in the news and having their name be searched in Google produces an incredible amount of data about every single business in the world. And so again, we're going to have a focus challenge as a platform company around how to tell those stories. But telematics is super cool. And I love this question just because it really shows that everybody's got a different point of view around what kind of data they've seen. Like I started in supply chain, so I know a little more about this particular area, but yeah, I'm sure there's many areas that we're not even thinking about yet. Mikhail, do you want to chime in here?
No, I think it was very well put. The main thing is that our ELT process does not support this kind of streaming solution, but for sure it's something that we're gonna have to keep our eyes on. It's because it's good for other things too, like like events are a thing of the future. Basically, like you want to see what people do in real time.
It also could be a good business model for us. We could ask people to pay us a lot more money if we're going to be ingesting a lot more data. So something to think about for the enterprise edition, certainly. Times EJ, doesn't Meltano try to do too much right now? The table on the homepage is pretty wide. GitLab started with SCM and built from there. What are your thoughts? I love this question because I had this question myself when I started. And I think if we'd started Meltano in 2007, 8, 9, 12, I don't know, at least 5 years ago, maybe we could have focused on just one thing. But going back to connect with the question earlier around, how does it feel to have maybe started late? We probably shouldn't do just one thing at this point, because that really would be super late to the game. The way to be different and to be helpful to users now is to tie together these different systems. The frustrating part is what it means is we're not very good at it yet. And we have to just be humble about that. The most important thing is that they actually tie together. So you can actually do the end-to-end thing. And then that becomes the value prop is, wow, it actually works end to end. And then we can start to raise the bar on each step of the process. And I definitely have an internal, grade that I kind of give each of these steps, like how good are we at each one? And then we kind of work through each of them. We're working through that right now in our UI. And then we cycle back to the beginning and we improve each one again. And as we're going, of course, we're engaging with users and we're learning more. I see we're at time. Trevor, you're so awesome. I appreciate it. So I'm going to make that be my last answer that I'll give live, and then I will type some answers in here. If you want to ask questions afterwards, totally cool. I'm going to stick around. But to make this grade public, I guess just the question in the chat is, does it make sense to make this grade public? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to. It's kind of like the maturity score that GitLab gives different aspects of its products. I haven't given it that much thought. It's more just like kind of a sophomore touchy-feely score. So yeah, I don't know. The time it might take to publish it might or might not be worthwhile versus just going and making it better right now, since our team is so small. But there's nothing inherently wrong with sharing it. I have 2 more minutes. I'm just going to use all of it. Are there offerings similar to Atlassian and Microsoft Azure in the data marketplace, meaning our company's already focused on the end-to-end offering? Emily, you want to just give us a 1-minute answer here?
Happy to. The short answer is no. There are no tools in the data space except for Meltano that are connecting things end to end. And when I first started at GitLab, I was a little skeptical about the idea of Meltano. And the more I use GitLab and the more I see what a wonderful experience it is to use the GitLab product and have an integrated experience, the more excited I get about what an integrated experience in the data space looks like.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And thank you everyone for coming. I wasn't sure how many people we would see in this Meltano group conversation, so I really appreciate it and look forward to meeting with you all again next month. Have a good one. Bye.